Hello, welcome to the 21st episode of Scary Thoughts, Horror, Philosophy, Culture. I'm Mark Kate.
I'm Chad Lott.
And today we have a guest, Andrew Sheets, AKA Meredeath, in particular of Stereo Argento. Say hi.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Do you want us to refer to you? I mean, you are in full face, and I so appreciate that you would get all dressed up for a podcast. Wish everybody could see you, but do you want to be referred to as Andrew or Meredeath?
I think if we can't call me the Babadook, then let's call me Andrew. I almost brought my little Baba outfit.
All right, bro. So, as you might have heard, this episode is about The Babadook, the movie from 2014. The next episode is, we haven't decided. You know what? Just look online.
Yeah.
Let's just leave this one to chance. God damn it, we didn't plan ahead.
Well, what should we do?
Let's move on.
Okay.
Hey, listeners, you're just going to have to sign up to our newsletter. Go to scarythoughts.org and join the newsletter, and that's how you can know about what's happening next. We're also on Facebook and Twitter, and now, recently, we are also on YouTube, if you're one of those people who listens to podcasts on YouTube.
Apparently, if you're suffering inside a cubicle somewhere, that's a very popular option. There's a lot of streaming that happens in offices of podcasts. I don't do it because of professional courtesy to my neighbors, but that's it.
So why don't we start off with some plugs, if anybody's got anything to plug.
I do.
Meredeath of Stereo Argento.
Yeah, so I'm going to plug Stereo Argento.
Talking to the microphone.
I'm going to plug Stereo Argento. It is this party that myself and my good ghoul friend and business partner Jillian Narling throw together. It is a horror film drag party, kind of in the style of Argento, very giallo, yellow, paperback thriller. But for our next one, it's on June 30th, we're doing staff picks. So Jillian and I sat down together and kind of came up with a short list of our favorite horror films that we want to assign to each performer to then come up with a number inspired by that horror film. We have Possession, Santa Sangre, Videodrome, Dressed to Kill, and of course, Suspiria.
Great. We have covered none of those films yet. We should get on that.
One day we will. And then if you guys come out, I'm definitely going to go against my usual bedtime and I'm going to come out and make it, as will probably Brad Peachy, who designed our awesome logo.
Yeah.
And his partner will be out there, so there will probably be a pretty good representation of Scary Thoughts people at Stereo Argento.
Great.
The faces behind the voice. I have something to plug, actually. A track of mine has been, it is on a compilation that just came out, this really amazingly curated ambient compilation series called Air Texture, and the one I'm on is curated by Spacetime Continuum, Jonah Sharp, and then I'm mixed in with artists like Juju and Jordash and Move D and Sunshine Jones and AB and Rose and Fred P. I'm really, really thankful. And it's kind of available everywhere, but airtexture.com. And while I'm flapping my gums, I'm going to apologize. It is maybe the only hot day in San Francisco probably we will get all year. And so I've got the windows open, so the quality of this episode's sound, despite all the, each episode I buy a new mic or a new preamp and try to improve your listening experience incrementally with each episode of Scary Thoughts. But today the windows are open, so occasionally it's going to get a little ugly.
It is
Sorry
hot.
In advance.
It is hot as the devil's taint outside.
It's really unpleasant.
Pretty gruesome.
And the man who just said taint is someone who's from New Orleans, so believe.
Yep.
Do you have some instructions for our listeners, Chad?
Yeah. So as per usual, if you're listening to this and you're completely impressed by how smart Mark or myself or Andrew sounds, go on over to iTunes and give us a 5-star review. As always, 5 stars representing the 5 points of the pentagram, so we can serve our Dark Lord with your encomium.
Hail.
Also, you can go over and give a thumbs up on YouTube, which is a cool thing to do, so we can beat the evil algorithms that keep us underneath six-pack ab videos and Jay Leno accoutrement or whatever. I don't know.
And the Babadook.
And the Babadook. We'll never beat the Babadook, but go over there, give us all these ratings. It's the thing that keeps us alive and in our Dark Lord's favor.
And as with every episode of Scary Thoughts, this is going to be all spoilery. we're going to be talking about a movie that we've all seen and you have also seen and should see. You should totally see this movie if you haven't already. There's no reason to listen to this podcast without having seen it. And even if you don't listen to this podcast, you should see The Babadook. Shall we get started?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So, who wants to start talking about why we rushed this episode to the front of the queue in time to get it out for San Francisco Pride weekend?
Well, I think it's clear. Doing a little bit of digging, finding the source as to how the Babadook came into this position is super funny.
Why not maybe explain what the position at all? Because I've brought this up to some people and they have no idea what I'm talking about.
The Babadook's out, y'all.
It's funny because like I feel like now, especially in the queer community, it's kind of, on its way out the door.
Right.
Like trends come and go quite quickly. But there are still people that are like, A, what's the Babadook? B, what's a gay icon? Like, you can just very confused by it all. And this is, I think, the first time I've really seen anything like this recently.
Yeah, so the Babadook has been appropriated, is probably the best, easiest word by the LGBTQII community. QQI.
There's two Qs.
God damn it.
Jesus, bro.
Etc. LGBT, etc. As this sort of icon. And it all started from this, speaking of algorithms, this misapplied algorithm to someone's Netflix account where obviously a queer viewer, their recommended viewing was a gay film, a gay film, a gay film, a gay film, Babadook, and another gay film. And he did a screen capture and posted it to his Tumblr account and was like, made an obvious joke about it. And it just sort of stuck and exploded. And there's been this basically meme explosion, this tweet explosion about the Babadook as a gay icon, as a queer representation. To my mind, there is nothing in the movie, even if you stretch really hard, and in all the text that's flying around about this, people are drawing some hilarious conclusions. But when they're trying to actually pull it from the film itself, it gets really sort of tenuous and doesn't quite work. It's the jokes that actually have nothing to do with the movie itself are, I find, the ones that are the funniest.
Yeah, I like that. Like, there actually is no real attempt that I've seen at all to justify it in any way with the film. It just seems like it's just been taken.
Yeah.
Which I think is hilarious.
Yeah, it's almost like gay terrorism, kind of like flipping this idea of people appropriating our culture, and then, we're gonna like throw a wrench in the system and just like kind of pick something out of a hat, and it's gonna then somehow represent us. But the thing about the Netflix, they actually put it in the LGBT section of Netflix.
Oh, I didn't know that.
No, because that's what the screenshot was, and I totally, upon seeing that, was like, oh, I've seen that there. Like, I don't even know if it was an algorithm glitch. For some reason, the Babadook was in the LGBT film.
So maybe it actually wasn't an algorithm. It was like someone at Netflix was just like, oh, the queens they'll just love this shit.
Eat her up.
It could have also been like, Mean Mother, Joan Crawford.
Okay.
Like, I mean, who knows?
That's not a stretch.
Like,
it is there.
If you're like half and half on like cruel women and gay fun movies, maybe it just like it pops up.
Yeah, the mom in the Babadook is so much more of a queer icon to me than the Babadook itself.
Sure.
But in like the guise of a Joan Crawford or
the histrionic redemptive woman character is a fucking staple of gay appreciation in cinema.
And I think the Babadook, for me, I kind of sat down and really tried. I came up with 3 questions that I asked myself. And the first question was, is the Babadook a appropriate or a valid icon that the gay community can use? And my answer to that is totally, absolutely. Second question being, is the Babadook queer? I think yes. Like, if I have to answer yes or no, I'm going to say yes.
How about sure?
Sure, yeah. Third question, does the film The Babadook have anything to do with the Babadook being gay? No.
Right.
No.
He was just born that way.
Yeah.
So but I also feel like this is essentially what the word queering is about. It's about taking something and subverting its purposes as queer content, as subverting heteronormativity, often with pop cultural elements. But I also think that this happening at this moment in pop culture history, it reminds me of what happened with Pepe, with the alt-right, or if, I know that when we intersect all of those worlds, they seem to come together and not come together, but it is a very similar gesture. It's like there's been this explosion of meme culture on the right in America. And the left, the artists of the creative cultures of the left have totally fucking failed to step up their meme game in the midst of what the alt-right has produced. And I feel like, I'm being a little cynical here, but I feel like part of the success of this Babadook queer meme is that the left hasn't had a good fucking hit like this in a while the right has had so many. Though a lot of the ones on the right a lot of them are based in cruelty, and this is based in a weird sort of dark celebration.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's interesting that you bring up the Pepe thing, because like both jokes are sort of aimed at corporations. I would say the Pepe joke is aimed at like the Hillary Clinton Corporation. And, this is sort of aimed at like laughing along with Netflix. And, I love that like Netflix kind of didn't stop it really. They weren't really like, oh, we fucked up, or there was no apology or mea culpa about it or whatever. Like it was just all in good fun. And one of my favorite things about this is it's just breathed life into this cool little movie that a lot of people probably might not have seen it otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really good movie. Any reason for people to have seen it, awesome.
I hadn't seen it. And so it completely changed my expectation of what I was going to watch. Like because I was expecting to see some silly, thing, or at least a more personality driven monster. And I was very pleasantly surprised by the film. Like it had effaced all of my expectations.
Yeah. How has this been sort of embraced by your corner of, you run a queer horror nightclub. So how has this affected that corner of the world?
The Baba discourse. It's rad that people are talking about discourse. That gives me a lot of hope that people are finally ready to start talking about some things and applying theory to them. But I think it's really just kind of manifested in 5 or 6 major images of the Babadook in which I've seen that kind of just infiltrate your feed over and over and over and over and over as memes do. So, drag queens are now dressing up as the Babadook. There are Babadook numbers. There are Babadook tutorials, how to do your makeup like the Babadook. What's next? I weirdly saw this headlines like alligators are the next queer icon or something. And
weird.
Yeah.
There
is because
they see you later.
I get a little sharp and a little defensive around what did you say?
Because they see you later. I don't know.
Doesn't make
later.
any sense.
No, but the kind of whole argument around why is the Babadook an LGBT friendly film? And it's clearly the B in LGBT stands for Babadook. And it's
good enough for me.
Yeah. And then it's also there's just so much rhetoric going around in the queer community. I feel like too many people are attacking each other from the inside in, with the addition of more letters to the acronym or the addition of more stripes to the rainbow flag. And I think it's interested in thinking about the alt-right that might not have anything better to do versus the liberal left that is just too busy kind of jacking each other off.
Yeah. No, I totally see that. And this
and
is
then
actually
in the queer community
fun.
particularly.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything else we want to dig into on that one? Or because I
Yeah.
feel like that is a very separate issue from this actual film that we're actually here to talk about, but don't want to give it short shrift before we move on.
Yeah.
Not at all. I think it's really rad that they refer to the Babadook in gender neutral pronouns in the film. I didn't go back and completely verify that, but there was this moment when I was watching it where I was like, oh, they referred to the Babadook as it.
Well, he is Mr. Babadook.
He is Mr. Babadook,
Yeah,
right?
But who knows what that means?
Yeah,
Sister Babadook.
Sister Babadook.
pretty
I mean,
sure it
there are
was
plenty
Sister
of drag queens with male names too. But as soon as I realized, like, Samuel, the son, kind of start to call it it, and how's it doing, and you let it in, it kind of then gave me like, okay, here's an argument. Like, maybe the Babadook does represent queerness as a whole rather than being a gay man. But then that just kind of like spins me down in a rabbit hole of like, because I feel like there are 4 different versions of the Babadook kind of represented in the film. We have the initial one where he's in the book, he's illustrated, he's popping out of the pages, he's goofy looking. The second one being just like kind of corners in rooms that are completely shadowed. Just that's kind of the Babadook over there. There's the one of like the live action Babadook where he's in like the kind of German expressionistic like television shows where he's like this kind of grand marshal of these like
Orloff-y too. Yeah.
and then the father where he kind of like embodies the father who died in the accident on the way to while she was giving birth. And I think all of those manifestations of the Babadook, some are queerer than others, but the ones that are still not like as flamboyant as, say, the guy who like appears in a cloud of smoke. Thinking about that side of queerness and then thinking about the shadowy in the corner, 3 knocks, kind of really deeper, darker version is also super queer. And I've been reading all these articles and people keep bringing up the word tragic, like, oh, the Babadook is such a tragic symbol. That's why the queer community has taken him on because their struggle is so real and all these things. And it's like, totally. Yeah. I mean, whatever. Like, that's why I'm like, he's totally a queer icon because fucking we just said so. Like,
Right.
Yeah, the last thing I thought about it was like ultimately like who's to say what a queer icon even needs to look like? You know, like we're getting into this age where like just it's so there's so many weird little pockets. Like as I've discovered with this show, like I never knew horror was just so popular amongst like LGBT crowds in general. Like,
Yep.
I mean, that's like if you go through,
Especially in this city.
yeah, I mean, if you go through like our followers on our Facebook page or our Instagram page, I'd say it's at least half, you know, which is, it wasn't like I guess I didn't have any expectation of that at all. I just thought it was going to be like straight neckbeards all the way through, you know, and it's been interesting to see. And I think it's for the show, I think it's affected the direction of the show and, you know, it's been a cool thing to have happen, but it also makes me think of like the original Gothic novels where you have like Lord Byron and all these like, you know, quasi-pagan secret society sex right having people who like wrote all these early like weird poems and things like that. And like, I feel like there's a bit of a connection with that.
Which is also totally proto-queer. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Castle of Otranto, who wrote that. Anyways, but Chad, you're my queer icon, so thank you for representing. Thank you for representing the queer community and half
That's
of your
amazing.
listeners.
I'd like to, as we're talking about, you could be represented anyway. I'd like to point out to my wife that this is without any eyebrow plucking at all. I've become a queer icon, so I was right about.
Well, if Crystal's trying to get you to pluck your eyebrows, I always advocate eyebrow plucking, like
You
anybody, everybody.
might want to pluck your eyebrows.
Jesus, you guys are bullying me. Look at this. See, you take the Babadook icon. Then
Come on, bruh.
Like, oh, Jesus Christ.
Babadook's eyebrows are flawless.
Do we know that? Is that canon?
They're Baba
Look at you
Beat.
with your tweezer. Jesus Christ.
I actually have a mirror.
You have a
here, too.
mirror and tweezers in that drawer right next to your desk.
Okay, so Andrew, let's talk while he's fixing his.
I am not fixing
Yeah.
my eyebrows. I'm literally holding a mirror and tweezers, which will go unused because I have to be me.
I'll tell you what, I'm going to go get a beer. You tweeze your eyebrows. Andrew, you do whatever the fuck you
Man,
want.
it's hot as fucking here.
It's
Is there another window to open? There is.
What's that?
Can you open that window? This show could never happen in New Orleans. We'll never be
And
able
we're
to
back.
do that.
Well, I mean, I think my feeling is that when you're in the Bay Area, you acclimate to the fact that it's always the same temperature. And whenever it deviates this much, everybody freaks out. So, like, this is nothing compared to New Orleans. But if you lived in New Orleans, you'd be just like, yeah, it's hot.
and they
Yeah.
probably have
What is
air
there to talk
conditioning.
about?
Yeah, we would have air conditioning.
San Francisco just doesn't because it's like
true.
we have
very, very true.
60-degree weather every day.
Yeah, it's made us all soft.
Yeah. and pale.
Speaking of soft and pale, let's talk about the Babadook. So, while maybe not exactly the film itself maybe doesn't present itself as an LGBT film, it does present itself as, I think, part of what we've been talking about is the auteur horror film, which we're kind of back to that, talking about that. And I think, we talked about The Witch in our second episode, and this film shares the set designer of The Witch.
Really?
So, yeah. So this guy, Alex Holmes, he did the set design for The Witch after he did the Babadook. And I think one of the things that's so pleasant about this film and people really liked about it so much is the tone of the film is all like blues and burgundies and grays and stuff like that. And it's not color treatment at all. It's actually like that's what the set looks like. And the main actress, she looks exhausted because she would stay up for extended hours to make herself more worn down. So everything that your eye is picking up is actually on the screen. And I think, even in like the newer horror movies, in our Conjuring episode, we talked about like how CGI and modern camera techniques are making it possible for kind of shitty horror movies to look pretty good. This is the next level where you're not even using any of that stuff. It's like an all set design and it looks gorgeous. And I think, the look of the film is almost its own character, I think.
Absolutely. It's definitely leans towards total filmmaking in a more traditional sense and does so very, very successfully.
Even towards theater, because that house is really the major set. It's funny thinking about that person then moving on to The Witch, because The Witch was so regimented, right? They had to like build all of the houses the way in which they would have been built in the late 1700s or whenever that film took place. But yeah, the house is a character, and I'm very interested in just houses in general. You two did the Conjuring films last week.
Yeah.
And my favorite type of horror films deal with domestic spaces, but not necessarily haunting movies. They're kind of more just about anxieties of space, dread. So I love like Polanski's Apartment Trilogy.
Totally.
In 2 years ago, I featured my first, or premiered my first feature film called Alone Not Alone. That was kind of this like quasi fourth installment to the Apartment Trilogy of Polanski.
Awesome.
And kind of, I would like to watch it again. And I think I'm going to put it on the internet any day now. Because it's like, why not?
If it's already done the circuit that you're going to get it out to, might as well.
But like this whole idea of like being alone, not alone, in my film, like it's like this person living alone, but like there's something else there, but it's also just kind of that person, but it's also kind of the camera. And I think the Babadook has some overlap there. Like,
oh, totally. There's a moment when the mother looks out the window at the old woman who's just by herself watching TV. And she has this like blissful smile on her face, like, oh, if only I was alone too. So with her, it's like either her love is there or alone. The kid is just clearly a drag.
Yeah. There's a point where she just snaps. But like leading up to that, I was like, tell the kid to eat shit. And she was like, why don't you go eat shit? And I was like, yes. Yeah. And then I was like, oh, wait, now I feel bad because that's the kid and you're not supposed to do that to the kid. But like, it's got to be so unfathomably hard to be in a situation in which she found herself annually, which I think is kind of the one subplot that most intrigued me, like kind of like the little jabs people would make, like, oh, we know this time of year is especially hard for you, or like things like that. And it's like, did this shit happen last year? Or like, does it keep getting worse each year and year? Yeah. Maybe last year was the year that she published or made the book, The Babadook, because the whole kind of thing is that she very briefly, when she's at her sister's daughter's birthday party, the friends are like, oh, are you still writing? What were you writing? And she's like, a little bit of this, a little bit of children's books and things like this. So then you're like, oh, okay. Upon watching it for the first time, I didn't make that connection. But now, like on the fourth run, I'm like, oh, so she published The Babadook.
Well, there's I don't know about that. I mean, I think there's definitely cues to that the Babadook is her creation. There is also a moment where she's reading in bed, and I didn't catch it the first time I saw the movie. I've seen this movie 4 times. I caught it the second time I watched it. She's actually reading The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, which is... Have you read that? You've read it, right?
Yeah, I love it. I mean, it is as cheesy as it fucking gets, but I swear to God, it's basically a self-help 12-step program for people who are paralyzed in their artistic endeavors. Like, you're not writing, you're not making that film, you're not doing ever. And it is basically framed around AA terminology and stuff like that. And every single time I've sat down with that book to work through it, it has radically changed my life. Like, I've gone through about 3 or 4 times now, and each time I've used it, it's completely like blown open creative possibilities for me. Like, I find myself with a new job or like a new city or something like that. And I think it's such a subtle touch. And, I don't think that she's not making books is what has driven her crazy, but it's just another layer. I think that's what's so great about Jennifer Kent, the director's take on her mental state, is that it really isn't just one thing. It's the husband is dead. The sister's life is so good in comparison. Like, her child is objectively terrible.
Maybe worse.
She has
at least the window we get into these 2 kids, we can find sympathy in Samuel. That little girl sucks.
Oh, the cousin.
She's cruel.
Yeah.
Samuel is not cruel. Samuel is a mess, but he means well.
Which makes me think that this happens every year, because it's like they resent him. Like, what happened? Like, something happened besides just like, the Babadook is in the room or whatever. And it's funny, the only time that the Babadook is mentioned anywhere outside of their house or their car is weirdly at her sister's house, where the sister's like, he was talking to the Babadook.
Yeah.
It's like, wait, why is the Babadook there? The mom isn't there. So why would
I think he was just talking about...
He's probably just...
Well, the aunt says that he's talking to the Babadook, but the chances are, like, I mean, this movie is so complex and it's not one thing or the other, is that he could simply be mimicking that because he knows it will disturb the cousin. And it's like his way of processing it. There's something interesting that happens after you've seen this film the first time, is it does a little bit of like the Fight Club Marla Singer thing, whereas like the first time you see Fight Club, Marla Singer seems like a fairly terrible character. But the next time you see it, you realize like, oh, this is a really sympathetic character. She's been driven to this insanity. And it very similar to what happens with Samuel, the son in this film, is you imagine like, oh, if his mother is fucking batshit crazy like she seems to be, no wonder he's a weird little kid that makes weapons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because the first time I watched this movie, I was definitely like, that kid is a nightmare. Fuck that kid. He's a monster. That poor woman. And motherhood is hard. And then each consecutive viewing of this movie, I kind of went in the other direction, where like, God, she's really fucking the parenting thing up.
Yeah.
All sympathy to her, because being a parent sucks. And I don't know what your plans are, Andrew, but the other 2/3 of the people in this room are non-parent people.
Yeah. It's times where I like get really, really frustrated over something where I'm like, I can't even have a dog, or like I can't even have a cat.
Yep.
But yeah, I don't know the right or wrong way to parent, but it seems like she just needs a vacation
And some lewds.
Yeah.
I mean, there's like the very opening scene where she's dreaming about the car wreck where her husband dies, and you can hear his voice going, "Mom, Mom, Mom." It's so piercing. And then she's having a nightmare and wakes up, and he's like, "Mom, I had the dream again." So immediately the film opens up where what's happening to her is being pushed aside by what's happening to him. And she seems not really able to deal with that so well. And, then he's laying in bed with her and he's wrapped around her grinding his teeth, which is something that she also does. They're both like teeth grinders. And then he's wrapped around her and she like pushes him off while she's sleeping and goes to the other side of the bed. So the film immediately sets up this coldness between her and him. Oh,
yeah. It rolls titles right after she rolls away from him. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is like this, like clearly they're both grieving or dealing with the death of the father differently. Mm-hmm. He's kind of grown up with this guilt, this annual guilt he never celebrates his birthday on the day. And I hadn't really thought about that yet, but like clearly she's the one having a dream, and then he steps in and it's like, no, it's my dream and I'm scared and you have to like take care of it and things like this. And then I think that makes moments like the bathtub scene where she's kind of submerged in the warm water and then kind of picks him up and has him join her as kind of this like...
I thought it was funny.
I thought it was funny too. It was like this like returning back to the womb and also kind of like, we are kind of in this together.
I feel like he's also a bit of an inverted Tyrion Lannister, who, of course... No, nobody. Game of Thrones, nobody.
I do not watch Game of Thrones.
I'm aware of Tyrion Lannister.
What is wrong with you people?
Although I've heard there's a bunch of
listening
dicks.
to this knows exactly what I'm talking about. Where you know what? Fuck you guys. I'm moving on. I'm so disappointed.
I mean, I've heard there's full frontal male nudity, so I will watch the show. I just need to start to carve out some time.
And not rarely.
Yes.
I do find that this is it is a rare instance of motherhood depicted as anything other than blissful. And even, sometimes when mothers are depicted in film as imperfect, they get their comeuppance, even if it's subtle. And I really appreciated that this movie shows the difficulty of motherhood, and it's not just their relationship. There's also the scene where they go to the restaurant and have ice cream for breakfast, and the next booth over, just these kids being hellacious. And the mother is like freaking out. And even her sister and all their friends, it's all bathed in this bright white light, and they're all glowing and their skin is clear. And it just feels it's shot in this very odd angle, and it's uncomfortable. And that's partly possibly because it's perhaps from her perspective, that it's a little uncanny, despite how beautiful it is in a sense. But I also feel like just motherhood is not depicted as an easy game. And if I can jump to the end, it's funny, when reading reviews of this movie and listening to podcasts and people's opinions of it, I found a lot of people found that it ended on a trite note, that she's like holding him and she's happy and she's loving him. And I wanted to get you guys' take, because I didn't read it that way. I feel like the last 5 seconds of this movie, where she's like holding him and it's all resolved, it doesn't seem comfortable. It doesn't seem right. She's not, it's not all warmth and okay.
The magic trick he does for her in that last little scene is impossible. Like, it's like for a 7-year-old kid to like make a dove just appear out of anywhere. Like, you're 7. You just have that one VHS of that like one guy doing magic tricks, and you like know how to make a pigeon appear out of nowhere. So like the whole thing was kind of like, are we, like, to reference Stranger Things, like, are we in the upside down world? Like, what is going on? But I had no problem with the ending, leaving it the first time I saw it in theaters. Every time I watch the ending now, I hate it. I'm just like,
because you think it's trite?
Yeah, I think it's. Okay. I think it's a little boring, and I think it's a little confusing too. Like, the Babadook is in the basement, but it's like still like aggressive, so she like still has to like be like mildly confronted by it, like each time, like it gets all up in her face and it's like Babadook or whatever, and she goes up and she said, oh, it was quiet today or whatever. Right. But I'm interested I was a basement kid, like as soon as I hit the age of
locked in.
No, they wish. No, as soon as I hit like the 8th grade, I was like, Mom, I'm moving down to the basement. That's where I'm gonna be now. And I think I think there is a lot of like, that could have been a big red or rainbow flag as to that your son is gay, because there's this idea around like seclusion and space, and this idea of like the phantom. Like, the Babadook is not anywhere as close as queer to me as like a Phantom of the Opera or a Frankenstein or even a Freddy Krueger, if we want to go down like the campy route. Sure. But for me, especially my relationship to space and domestic space, think that basements offer more than what the film did. It kind of just was this dumping ground where she ended up getting trapped within, spewed the Babadook onto the floor, and now the Babadook just kind of is there. But what makes me think, again, that this is like an annual occurrence is that at the beginning of the film, the dog is like scratching at the basement door. Like the Babadook was already down there. And there's like some clothes hanging on the wall that maybe Samuel set up to resemble his father or the Babadook or something. But I just didn't get much closure around the ending.
My take on it generally, on this movie generally, is that maybe not so simplistically, but that the Babadook represents grief. That's probably the most simplistic metaphor I think that we could apply to the Babadook, is that he represents her grief for the loss of her husband, and she can't get over losing him, and that over time, her not confronting her grief and working through her grief in some sort of traditional psychoanalytic way, she still needs to process it, and it gangs up on her. It gets the best of her. It takes over her life in a way that is so bad that she's unable to function as a human, let alone a parent. And that the ending is essentially that you never actually get rid of your grief. She conquered it in a sense. You know, in therapy, there are aha moments, and she had that kind of a psychological breakthrough. But you never get rid of your grief. You never get rid of the damage that you incur psychologically as a human being. And so the Babadook was represented as her husband's stuff that she was not dealing with, just left in the basement, hoping for what? Who knows? She just wasn't dealing with it. She dealt with it, but you can't get rid of it. But at least she, the feeding the Babadook the worms, which are, feed on corpses. It's like she is acknowledging that there has been a death and that she needs to feed that death. She needs to feed that corpse something. She can't ignore it. She still needs to be processing her own grief and her own suffering.
She can name it, and it's not until the epilogue where she begins speaking outright about the fact that her husband died. Like the only instance where we know that's happened was Samuel, like, my dad died and my mom won't talk about it, kind of thing, like to strangers in the grocery store, or like So she's finally able to talk about it.
I think leading up to the end is also this kind of really subtle nature versus nurture thing coming, where they're consistently talking about how much Samuel was like his father, and he always speaks his mind. And it could be, in some ways, that her mental illness is being exacerbated by the fact that he's coming to resemble his father more and more, even to the point where he's like hanging up his clothes. There's a point where he's performing his magic show for his mother, the Babadook, and the father, and that's when he hangs up the clothes on the wall. Like that's his dad there. But for me, I actually really liked the ending because there's a lot of kind of subtle, funny stuff going on. Like when the camera pans up from darkness to the garden scene, you can subtly see the body of the dog. Yeah. And then there's a black rose. It's really kind of silly. And then, as somebody who's like basically a lifelong depression sufferer, like the whole idea that like this thing is not beatable and it's going to kill you one day, and it's just a thing you have to go down there and go after every single day. I think for me that resonated, but also tying it a little bit to her reading The Artist's Way is, one read on the ending is that she's going down in the basement to work on her novel or something like that. So, and every day that creative pursuit is more difficult or less difficult depending on whatever happens. But you have to go down there and like dig some shit up like the worms and just feed it to your creative monster. So like, I like to think that she's become a creative person again. But it's only been like 2 weeks since she vomited all the Babadook all over the floor. Yeah. So it's pretty much, it could easily go off the rails.
Sure. Well, I mean, the book does say you can't get rid of the Babadook. Since I bring that up, another thing that I really appreciate about this film, and it's something I brought up in the 10 Cloverfield Lane episode, which is that there's such an economy of elements in this film. Almost every word out of everybody's mouth refers to another part of the film. Or like, for example, the movie starts with her reading to Samuel Three Little Pigs, and then later she calls him a pig, and it is also a children's book, and there's all this "let me in," which is a reference to the wolf in The Three Little Pigs. And so almost everything in this movie is somehow circular and contained within its own universe. And I mean, that's always fun. I tend to appreciate that, but it also really speaks to the commitment and efforts of the filmmakers to really rigorously work over that script and the art direction and the direction to create a very whole piece. Because it could easily just do none of that and be a similar film, but not a great film, right?
I mean, I was really impressed with Jennifer Kent, the director of the film. Like, first of all, the film speaks for itself. It's great. But in interviews, I mean, she just seems great, like so smart, you know, and she's got the formula figured out. Like all these films that we've reviewed lately that have been great, they're all Polanski fans. They all watched a lot of Hitchcock. They believe in practical effects. They believe in minimalist sets. Everything has to be extremely worked over. And they're okay with ambiguity. You know, a lot of the discussion around the Babadook and the internets is about whether or not the creature exists or not, which to me personally, I don't find super interesting, but I totally understand why people find that. Like if you want like a really good breakdown of that, our buddies over at Deadly Analysis, they have a YouTube podcast.
They're really good on that.
They do a great job of breaking down, you know, the physics versus metaphysics of the character or the Babadook itself, the monster. And they basically walk out, you know, it exists, it doesn't exist, it exists in a magical realist sort of way. And I think that take is where I think that for me, it doesn't matter if it does or it doesn't exist because in her mind it exists, you know? So, and since the film is like Rosemary's Baby, like a one perspective movie, it's basically all from her perspective. You just got to go with it. It like that's, to me, you just kind of have to go with it. It exists, and it exists within her mind, and you don't have any other information about if it exists in the world. Yep. What do you think? Does it exist?
I think it exists in the same way that I think that the meme is valid. Like I think it's all fine. I think there's no right or wrong way.
Totally. Great.
And I think that Mark, what you just brought up, the clearest image that came into my mind is, you know, she's ripping up the book, and then towards the end, the whole house kind of like in a Repulsion-esque kind of nod, like starts tearing apart. There are like these cracks that like start to take over the house that like don't really look like cracks, but they look like rips in pages. So I think there is a very thin line, if any line at all, between the world of the book and the world of the film. And I think the world of the Babadook existing versus the world of the Babadook not existing is kind of there too.
It's even mirrored in the film where it's like, does the book exist or not? When she goes to the police department, she's like, oh my God, somebody made this book. It's got pictures of me and my kid all dead. And they're like, well, where is it?
If I was a cop, I would have taken that a little bit more seriously, I think.
The cops were, for me, a bit of a weak spot in the film.
Yeah. I mean, like that
not like every interaction I've had with a cop has been fulfilling by any means, but yeah, that cop scene was a little bit horror film, let's move the plot along by having something that I wouldn't think it would go that way.
I did appreciate though in that scene how one of her hands was inky and the other hand wasn't inky, so it's kind of showing like these two sides of her. I mean, clearly she suffers from depression, but maybe it's something else too. Maybe she has borderline personality disorder, maybe she is bipolar. Or maybe I just have never experienced any kind of loss like that.
Well, I looked up postpartum depression and did a little bit of reading about that because, I mean, before this film, the only thing I knew about it was Tom Cruise yelling about it on Oprah's couch or whatever the fuck, whenever he was talking about, like, you know, his belief. Who was the actress that he was kind of attacking?
Katie Holmes?
No, he attacked her by marrying her.
The one before
Brooke Shields.
Nicole Kidman.
No, Brooke Shields, the woman who...
Brooke Shields?
Yeah, like she had a baby.
This is the first time this year someone has said Brooke Shields.
Yeah, I don't know. I could have it wrong. I'm really not up on my celebrity.
No, Nicole Kidman was like his mail order bride.
Not his wife. No, there was an actress who was coming out as like a postpartum depression sufferer.
Oh,
and I'm pretty sure it's Brooke Shields. And he had said something about like, well, all you need is Scientology or some bullshit like that, you know. And so that was the last time I'd really even heard about postpartum depression, was in relation to some weird corny Scientology thing on E! News or something like that. So I wasn't really well versed in it. And I went in and started looking at these forums, and it is really horrific. I mean, there are a lot of people who have the exact same feelings to their kid that she does, you know, and I thought it was something that happened like a few months after childbirth. Like, I don't know if you guys know this, but infanticide, like when a woman kills a child, is like a crime of insanity legally, because the idea is that, like, you know, women's issues, they're just so emotional or so whatever after childbirth, so they can't be totally held responsible. This has actually gone over pretty well in Faculty of Horror's Babadook episode. They kind of talk about like the politics around that. But what I didn't even know is it can last decades. Like, you could be suffering postpartum depression for decades. So I think I love that there's like a whole bunch going wrong with the mom, like depression, postpartum depression, you know, grief of a loss of a husband, creative unfulfillment.
Her
All
job
she really
sucks.
needed was not Mr. Babadook, but Dianetics.
Yeah.
So Babadook is not queer. He is a metaphor for Xenu.
Xenu. Yeah.
Fuck.
Yeah. See,
Everybody's wrong.
There you go. There's a new meme.
What a breakthrough.
Week after Pride.
We did it.
Is it
Yeah, we should not let anybody know that until after Pride.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bonus features. I think of the book, The Babadook, as the Necronomicon, kind of. In this, or like the Necronomicon, because I was kind of transcribing what the storybook actually says, and like I was all writing it out, and then I was like writing the words like, you can't get rid of the Babadook, and I was all, oh my god, am I opening up a portal right now? Like, am I shooting myself in the foot, kind of thing?
It's a bit of an invocation.
Yeah. But also I like thinking about the book as a meme in and of itself. Like, maybe the Babadook is, you know, he keeps popping up, like whether it's in a word or in a look, or in a book or on the television or in your car at the door. He's kind of just like always there. And that just brings me back again to this whole idea of me just scrolling through my Facebook feed, just being like, Baba work, mama, yes, like Baba the house down. And it's just like, it's constant and it won't let up. And yeah, maybe I want to go back to talking about the Babadook as a queer icon, but maybe try to find some more connections between the narrative of the film and that. He wears makeup.
Well, I feel like the aesthetic of the Babadook is not unlike plenty of drag numbers I've seen over the years. So
Yeah. Well, you know, another thing that we constantly come back to is the Rocky Horror Picture Show, right? And to me, like, when I was growing up, there were always queer kids around, like the horror shows and stuff like that. So it seems very, like, even though for some reason we were texting the other day, I was like, holy shit, do we have a queer horror show? And, you know, I was kind of being a little facetious, but we sort of do. Yeah. And I was like, well, how did that even develop? And I was like, well, it just seems like it's always been like that. You know, people who are into horror are into John Waters stuff usually. And people who are into John Waters stuff, like all the 70s movie films that like Quentin Tarantino reveres. And so there definitely does seem to be this like counterculture element to all of this stuff. And it's interesting that like the memes of the Babadook seem to be the memes of the queer counterculture, not the queer mainstream, you know, because you'll see.
Well, if I may, I feel that is sort of essentially what, to my mind, is emblematic of queerness versus assimilationist LGBT no Q, no I identity, is that non-queer gay is about assimilation, and it is in some faux non-politicized way an inversion of the way in which that outsider identity genuinely positions you. And it is to reject that outsiderness, which, being not queer, I totally understand the desire for people to not be forced to be outsiders when they want to be. Mm-hmm. However, I far more identify with people who are outsiders because they can't help it. Like, does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think I would agree. I mean, the first queer culture I ran into was queer counterculture. I didn't run into Will and Grace. You know what I mean? Like that's,
yes.
you know, I ran into like
John Waters.
the leather. Yeah. Like John Waters. I mean, like I met John Waters when I was like 17, you know, like it was like a big deal at the time. And,
Still a big deal.
yeah, still, I would like to actually met him and now actually have an opinion, something interesting to say. Like, I really liked that movie. It was awesome. It's fucking embarrassing. But, you know, I wonder, you know, like how deep does it go? Like, I mean, like, could you make, I mean, I guess there are explicitly queer horror movies but they're more like Peaches Christ's film or something like that. You know, like I wonder, like, are there even any horror films that feature prominent gay characters?
The second Freddy movie.
Yeah, or just Freddy in general. Like, but
or Freddy in general.
But I think the second film, like the whole coach scene is definitely, or just like the fact that he was the first final boy versus a final girl. I feel like I just watched so many horror movies and I can't think of one that's like just gay.
Well,
I feel like they're all gay.
Funded. Let's say funded because
Funded,
if
correct.
like over $2 million because under that there's probably like
my movie was
5,000
my movie was
queer.
gay.
Exactly.
My movie was
exactly.
And thank you for that.
Well, okay, Nightbreed, kind of. You know, like I mean, like that's a movie that Clive Barker's been pretty explicit talking about, that Midian is essentially, you know, gay Toronto or wherever, you know.
What a scene that would have been, gay Toronto. So can we back up for just a second? I'm curious about, not to just objectify you, but you're probably like half my age or something like that. And so my view into queerness is definitely
Old.
Sculpted by the fact that I'm straight and my age, you know, my understanding, my view into that identity, that culture, that is, despite the fact that I've been completely immersed in it since high school to some degree, I kind of don't know how that sort of like queer, not queer, gay, not queer line is drawn with the young with the kids. How do you view that sort of delineation?
I guess I'm confused by the question.
So, okay, maybe this will be a little more, I know my question is sort of idiosyncratic, but like when I was a teenager, let's say.
In the 70s.
1870s.
Nearly. Gay was still dangerous.
Yes.
Right? However, at Castro and Market Street, there's a pottery barn. Will and Grace. Like, there are these things that are not quite queer, they're gay, and they're not dangerous. That's, I wouldn't say that's new, but that's new. And you grew up in more of that safety and homogenization and assimilation.
Yeah. Drag is on VH1.
Yes.
Right now.
Exactly.
Like, and I think because there is no danger, I think that it's just readily available to a lot of people. 6-year-olds are doing drag now, and they are more famous than me. And
fuckers.
There's just so much saturation, like in the fucking drag community. I'm just like, I'm getting all like Catcher in the Rye about it. I'm like, who's a phony? Who's not a phony? Because it's like gotten to that point where it's just like, fuck, like it's just the zeitgeist right now. It's just so trendy to be like us. I don't know.
Sure.
Genre film too, you know, I mean, like there's how many seasons of American Horror Story and like how many great horror films out now. It just seems like the accessibility of all this stuff is at an all-time high, and I think my 20-year-old self would have been fucking disgusted, but now I'm pretty jazzed on it. Like I love that there's like 50 great horror movies on Netflix that I haven't seen, or you know, any of the performers that are on RuPaul's Drag Race that I would have never heard of otherwise. So it's a mixed bag, I think, for sure. I think it'll be interesting to see what the function of the counterculture is, because you know we talk about like Twitter and like the weird segments of Twitter, but really all that stuff is like fast tracking the underground to the mainstream in a weirdly accelerated way. And like, you know, that Zero Books, the accelerationism, that title, it talks about like just how fast things go from underground to overground, and then just thrown away. And so I do have a little bit of concern that once this stuff gets like the fucking franchise Marvel treatment, it's all going to be ruined, you know, because like the Babadook, I mean, imagine how shitty this movie would be if it had been made with the idea of an expanded universe.
Right.
You know, and then like The Conjuring first one is pretty good. Conjuring 2 has some trouble. And now we were talking about
Annabelle eats shit.
Yeah, Annabelle 2.
The Nun.
Yeah, The Nun.
The
Nun
Crooked
2.
Man.
The Crooked Man is ridiculous.
It's ridiculous, but not far off from the Babadook too. Like, have you two seen the Beware the Slender Man documentary on HBO? Mm-hmm. Like, we're talking about the boogeyman. The symbology of the boogeyman across many boards, like the Bye-Bye Man, the Tall Man with Jessica Biel, who I just love. Ever since she was in the Chainsaw remake, I was like, that's who I want to be when I grow up.
Wow.
But yeah, you know, and then that's another thing from Seventh Heaven to watching people get their heads sawed off. But it's an archetype. And I feel like the perpetuation and the speed at which we're going at now, that it is so hyperspeed and things are being produced much quicker than they were before I was born. I just don't know if there's that many more archetypes in the bowl to pick from. So I think that's kind of where I also stand with you, where it's like, oh, another horror film kind of like. And I think I listened to your last episode too, and like you're, you know, discussing like what's going to be the next thing in horror. And I think it's just going to take someone like doing a bunch of homework, kind of like how the guy in The Witch did it, but something that just like completely blows us out of the water.
Yeah.
I've been reading about the fourth dimension in relation to technology, like considering the digital hive mind as the fourth dimension and how we're all able to exist in multiple places at once, and how that's kind of like a clear marker of being four-dimensional. Like the four-dimensional man is able to walk through walls, or Mr. Tickle, you know, from the Mr. cartoons. It's like this like really creepy children's book where this guy just has like infinitely long arms, and he can just reach out his window, go across town, and tickle you. And then
that sounds terrifying.
Yeah, and you're like a kid, so it's also not too different from the Babadook.
Man, being tickled anonymously from a distance is just sort of like Grindr.
It kind of is.
Yeah. I am glad that you brought up the what is the future of horror thing, and it makes me think about like this style of direction is going to be the baseline. Like you're just like to have a good horror film, you're going to have to pay an obsessive amount of detail to the sets. You're going to have really just A-level acting, but then it's going to have to address some sort of anxiety. And I think the fourth dimension stuff is interesting because it's like, you know, as people believe less and less in things like the devil or whatever, like, you know, like how many times can you do an exorcism scene if nobody actually believes in the devil, you know?
Yep.
So you get to the point where it's like, maybe the frontier is the kind of like the brain in the jar type of stuff where it's like, do I even know where I am? Like, what is the dimension that I'm in? And does
like
that
Jacob's Laddery?
Yeah, kind of like Jacob's Laddery, but just like almost like suburban Jacob's Laddery. Like, you know, are you shifting in and out of like nightmarish zones, but as part of your day to day? Like, I mean, I sort of like shift into a nightmarish zone every time I go to work, you know, like where's the expansion of that in horror?
I think the people who are making Black Mirror are doing a really
totally
good call
with that. Each episode is just so relevant and so well done, and so something I've never seen before, but kinda. So it's like really accessible. And you know, we can't ignore technology. Like I have ideas for other films that I want to make, and it's this kind of, you know, it's like the hermit kind of like, I need to become reclusive. I need to get to my roots. Just a candle, just a pad of paper, see what happens. But like, that's super unrealistic. That Google Maps has already found that cabin. Like,
this is a bit of a vector from what you just said. I'm being less analytical with this, but there is a trope in almost every horror movie that has to be confronted in the last 20 years, which is the ubiquity of mobile phones. Because everybody has a mobile phone, almost all horror movies have to figure out a way to overcome that lifeline.
Right.
We all have a lifeline. It's called a mobile phone. If you're in a horror movie, somehow, I can't get reception. That has to be said. And in this film, I was thinking about, is that exist in this film? And I found it to be when she goes to the therapist, and the therapist says, well, we can get you an appointment in a couple of weeks. And
Socialism. I'm just kidding. Like socialized medicine.
Yeah,
like
no,
she has to wait for
it's
weeks.
fucking, it's the best.
Yeah.
No, it's awesome.
No, but she has to wait for weeks.
No, but then it's free.
I'm just kidding.
So, but not.
Yeah. If this was America, she would have just straight up written him a script to shut him the fuck up. There would be no. It's like how I always say, like Fight Club now wouldn't exist. Like no doctor would be like, just go stop drinking caffeine and take valerian root. They would have just jacked him up with pills.
Yeah.
Like this kid would have been a zombie, and there would have been no Babadook.
Totally. But I guess my thinking was that you have to wait a few weeks for an appointment is my cell phone can't get reception. It's the answer. It's the like, well, wait, because this movie is really like, you're crazy, go get therapy.
Yeah.
Your kid is crazy, give him some pills. Please don't give your kids pills.
Unless they're coming to visit my house, then just like load them the fuck up.
Bring an iPad.
You know what? You're the parent. You choose what goes in the kid's face. But it does defer the reality of the situation. Can't use the mobile phone because there's no reception. Can't get therapy help because there's a waiting list. It's a sort of a similar gesture.
Yeah. I've been kind of like pinning a horror novel lately. And I found myself having a little bit of a problem dealing with the ubiquity of mobile technology in the story. I was like, I guess this will be set in the 90s. Peace out, bitches.
Yep.
And
retro,
yay. And so now it's like retro is actually, we used to say retro just for the sake of retro. Now, like you can mobilize, that same vibe for the sake of making a story simpler, which is kind of, although The Witch takes it as simple as it can get, like into ye old timey times,
right.
So that's, you guys ever watched The Mighty Boosh? That show? No, there's a scene where they're like taking retro back to its natural, taking retro all the way back, and all of a sudden they're wearing like Florentine outfits or something like that. But Mr. Show is like another one of those things we sometimes talk about off mic, where it's like I should like it, and there's no really reason why I should. I just bristle to it just because.
You'll come around.
I think that what has happened to the Babadook is really worth sitting down and maybe concocting a screenplay over. Like, we're talking about, you can't reach for your phone because your phone is the thing. I mean, have you seen the Rings, the third installment in the Ring, the American Ring franchise? I didn't hate it.
Okay.
At all. I thought it was, totally terrible, but
sometimes they come around. Seed of Chucky is great.
Yeah, like it was nothing about it was good, but it was solid. It was like, like what happens when someone rips the VHS and puts it online, and now it's available to everybody. And I think what's happening with the Babadook is similar, but it's much more meta. It's like a cabin in the woods kind of thing. Like, we're scared of a horror film, but we're also scared of that horror film's effect on our culture, whether it's scary or not. But just that there is no fourth wall anymore. It's just like an onslaught, like disassociation from like what's a film, what's not, what's on my phone, what's not, what's safe, what's not.
Yeah, that mirrors, Grant Morrison's ideas about, narrative chaos magic, and the idea that you as a creator would make a character that is you, that influences your real life. I mean, that's sort of the story of drag, right? Like you create this character, you perform it. If it's successful, it changes your life. That's the whole, like the Invisibles.
And that's magic.
That's
CK magic. Create your own reality and live through it.
Calvin Klein magic?
Uh-huh.
CK1.
There was almost a joke coming out of all three of our mouths. Didn't land.
I know. I was like about to do a Louis C.K. joke and like.
What about what's his face, Marky Mark?
Yep.
As we sometimes want to do, we think about like fan fiction stuff, and part of my idea was that somewhere there's a bookstore that has the worst children's book section ever, and there's all these different sort of monster books that women take home with them, and it manifests as fucking demons. Like, I think that would be kind of
good titles.
You know,
I know you've taken it a few steps further.
Oh no, and I actually haven't. I mean, maybe like "Shut the Fuck Up or Die" would be one of them. Mm-hmm. No, you can't have that.
Got it.
Or, I don't know.
So it's like the elevator scene in Cabin in the Woods, but instead of monsters coming out, it's just someone being like, "Here's a book.
Yeah,
it's called Wash Your Own Damn Dish."
Yeah.
So I want to bring something up that's come up in a bunch of previous episodes, and I hope this doesn't, Andrew, exclude you from the conversation.
I listen
if you're
to
not.
a lot of them.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So, is Samuel hypersane? Right? Mm-hmm. Right?
Well,
so
okay.
if I may set that up a little more. So there is the question that we can raise that we sort of dismissed of, is this the product of her mind? Is she in Crazy Town? Or is this some sort of, or is the Babadook real? Or is it sort of magic realism where it's kind of in between? But that doesn't answer the question of, well, what's going on with Samuel? Samuel sees and fights back this Babadook. It's infecting his nightmares. That doesn't mean it's any more real. That they could be folie à deux. It's expressing itself in both of them in different ways. But perhaps it's a product of Samuel being hypersane.
Sure. Well, for anyone who hasn't listened to the episode, let's do a quick run over on hypersanity. So hypersanity is essentially the idea that you could be so sane, you see the world so much as it is in all of its darkness, that it makes you respond to it in ways that seem insane to other people. So the most talked about example of this in pop culture is Heath Ledger's Joker from The Dark Knight. So the idea is that he sees Gotham as it really is, a terrible, awful place that's easily manipulated by people's desires, and he is able to do all the awesome Joker shit because of it. So I think there's evidence in the film The Babadook that Samuel is hypersane. There's a moment where the old lady next door says, "Oh, he's just like his father. He sees things as they are." And in the book, The Babadook, there's a line about, like, if you see it as it is, you can be his friend or something like that. I think we should look that up.
It says, it's in the middle of the pop-up is the Babadook peering through a doorway. Could be a closet, but it looks like more like a doorway. If you're really a clever one and you know what it is to see, then you can make friends with a special one, a friend of you and me.
Yeah. So that's exactly the line. And, he is, like a lot of hypersane characters, very technically enhanced. Like he can make all these weapons, very similar to John Goodman's character in 10 Cloverfield Lane. There's also in, like, for instance, Stranger Things, the characters who do see the upside down world. They've entered, like, kind of a stage of hypersanity, and they've entered into the conspiracy of that world. And so, yeah, I think that Samuel is like proto hypersane. Like he is seeing the world that he lives in, which is essentially just the house and his school as it is. And I think even, like, the thing of, like, bringing weapons to school, he's probably bullied at school because he's a fucking weirdo. And,
so he's gone all Data from Goonies.
Yeah. It's like, he's going to go
building
like
these contraptions.
Yeah. He's like Trenchcoat Mafia meets Goonies.
Meets Rube Goldberg meets Home Alone.
Yeah. Yeah. He's definitely like a little school shooter in the works.
Yeah. I think I agree actually with both of you, but a counter argument could be that he kind of was already talking about monsters from the get-go, like, "Mama, look, I'm gonna bash the monster on its head." Yep. And that's actually before they even find the book, The Babadook, for the first time.
But he might be, if the Babadook is a metaphor, he might be referring to the metaphor before it's manifesting itself.
Right, and now he has a name for it. So that's that is the only argument I could say. Like, maybe he's just a kid, maybe he just needs attention, and maybe now he has a name for that. And that is something that he can just throw out there, bring to school, scare kids with.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it is the monster up until it's Mr. Babadook, and then after that point, it's the Babadook. You know, so he has the name for it.
And that growing thing, it's funny because, as in previous episodes, we've talked about this thing I've called villainous trifling, which is another issue that recurs in horror films where why doesn't the big bad just kill them all right away? Mm-hmm. Why is it drawn out? Well, logically, why is it drawn out? But Samuel says, and it's as if he knows, it wants to scare you first, then you'll see it. Mm-hmm. And that suddenly just explains away why it's growing and manifesting and growing and manifesting.
I've heard that somewhere else. Another movie has done that.
Really?
Right?
Probably lots.
Like
it wants to. Freddy Krueger.
Yes.
I don't know if it's explicitly said, but that's pretty much Freddy Krueger.
I mean, the mom basically dispenses with this creature, at least temporarily, using the Freddy Krueger methodology, which is like, you aren't shit.
Yep.
And then it like disappears. You know, like that seems pretty
is awesome in the movie. She vanquishes, but if you back up and sort of go like, okay, methods of vanquishment. How do we get rid of the Babadook? Mom just yells at it.
But you can't get rid of the Babadook.
No.
That whole, honestly, from the possession to the epilogue, I got lost. The only thing that I like, if we're talking about the text, it talks a lot about, and this also ties in how he might be effeminate or queer, things about his attire, like, this is what he wears on top. He's funny, don't you think? Funny could clearly just be replaced with the word gay.
Funny that way.
Yeah. But then there's one that's, once you see what's underneath, you're going to wish that you were dead. And it's not really until the final fifth of the film where the Babadook takes off his coat, and then he's like this giant thing, and then it kind of ends with the coat just flopping on the floor.
Yeah.
So it's why was he wearing a coat? Was he trying to pass as normal, or was he trying to pass as something familiar?
Yeah, there's two things I thought about. One was that once you see what's underneath, you'll wish you were dead too. There's one moment where the husband is underneath all this stuff, and you're like, oh, maybe she wishes she was dead too, so she could be with her husband, and
yes,
she wants to do that. But I love the Lovecraftian horror element of once the costume thing's off, it's so horrifying you don't even see it. It's just a flash of light, which reminds me a little bit of the golden suitcase in Pulp Fiction, where there's just some bizarre element. It's never explained. It's everything. And whatever it is blindingly light, and then because she is one of the best facial expressions I think she has is when she's looking into that light. She looks actually terrified, and then it passes and goes down into the basement or whatever. But I think that's a really interesting scene. And you don't, again, she's so conservative with showing you the monster, and the ultimate form of the monster she doesn't show you at all, which I think is great.
Yeah, although I did find it an interesting turn in the movie that she never sees the Babadook. It's just this sort of floating irritant via her kid until she drugs him.
Uh-huh.
Because, okay, so even though Samuel's pretty insufferable, regardless of what you think of why, he's pretty insufferable. But watching it again and again, I sort of realized there are only really two things he does in the movie. Everything he does in the movie is based on two things. He's afraid, and he's reacting to his fear, or he's trying to protect his mother. Mm-hmm. He doesn't really do anything else in this movie, almost. There are exceptions. But so that means he's vulnerable or he's valiant. Mm-hmm. And I think that thinking of him that way, he is successfully staving off the Babadook from his mother until she drugs him and incapacitates him, and that is when she finally sees him, and he becomes manifest in her life.
There's also some weird threads between the mother and also Samuel's conscious self, when she consciously decides to masturbate, that somehow pulls a little thread that wakes Samuel up in the other room, and oh my god, the Babadook is in the room. Right. Or there's this thing where she has a headache or a toothache, and she's rubbing it, and then in the other room, the Babadook is somehow being manifested.
He's like a genie. If she's trying to rub one
Yeah,
out or rubbing her jaw, it just manifests him.
I think,
sort of like an inverted black swan masturbation scene.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's the mother who's... Yeah, never mind.
Yeah, I mean, this whole film, I'm thinking about like inverted versions of the film, and I thought about, what was it? It'll come to me. But just like if the Babadook was, Antichrist. Because Antichrist, they're grieving the loss of the child, and in this movie, they're grieving the loss of the husband.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah.
Well, she was the understudy of Lars von Trier.
Oh, yeah. She studied under him. Yeah.
Is it Trier or Trier? Trier. Yeah, Lars von Trier. And that's yet another thing I love about her is instead of going to film school, she's like, I'm just going to find some badass person and ask if I can like apprentice to that person. And,
Great.
Very cool. Very cool.
God, I can't imagine working under that guy. Talk about monsters.
Yeah, and
Fuck, he's an animal.
And like anything goes, but it doesn't. Like the whole dogma movement is just so funny. I mean, it's maybe similarly to the 12. What's the name of that art?
Dogma 95?
No, how to make art.
The Artist's Way.
Yeah, the Artist's Way.
Oh.
That book for me is like just reading their manifestos is oftentimes very helpful, but then I just see how regimented it is, and I can't imagine being Lars von Trier and ever having to go home with myself kind of thing.
Well, we were talking about like if we were going to make a movie, would we make it to those rules or whatever? And the one thing that was like film, like, fuck that,
Yeah. Or like kind of fuck that. Like maybe just make your own rules, but maybe not make them want you to not make movies anymore.
Let's do an episode where we just write a manifesto and just read it.
Yeah.
Just as the exercise of just to see what kind of rules are worth, I don't know.
What we come up with. What would be fun is if we do it like Mad Lib style, where we each come up with like 5 rules, and then they have to work together.
Yeah,
and
totally.
It'd be pretty
Exquisite
awesome
chords.
too. I wish we had I wish we were like a big, huge podcast and we could offer like a money prize for somebody who made the best film or whatever.
Maybe we should.
This is your challenge.
Yeah.
Like, okay, listeners, make a movie based on our ridiculous rules. Well, you've made a film. Did you see her short film Monster?
No, but it's kind of the seed of this film, right?
Yeah, it's on Vimeo, and like I'm always really fascinated with how people learn how to make movies because I like years ago I was like whatever the lowest level scrub on a film like is like not even a PA, but like the guy who just hauls the box over to the PA. And I worked on like basically an 18-hour set, and I thought for sure I wanted to work in movies. And at the end of the day, I was like, fuck this, I don't want to work in movies.
It's brutal.
This is terrible.
Yeah,
like this is actually terrible. And it amazes me that somebody can go from the small film to a production of this size. I mean, just like fucking find a caterer. I don't know how to do that. Like all that shit that goes into making a movie. It's incredible.
Yep.
I mean, what do you think would be your challenges for going from where you're at to like a feature?
Oh my gosh. I like the next person that tells me to move to LA needs to just go and eat shit. Because I think like
John Waters will tell you otherwise.
Really? LA is his...
No. John Waters would not tell you to move to LA.
Oh, right. Yeah. I mean,
Look at where his best work came from.
There's like, I went to the Art Institute and guests that you've had on the show have both taught there, Fonique and Joshua.
And I was a student.
And you're an alumni, correct? Yeah. But I think about like, because I studied under the New Genres Department, which is a conceptual art department focused mainly on performance and video
They will
work.
teach you zero skills.
Zero skills.
If you want to be an artist but don't want to actually learn how to do something.
Exactly. But then I
that's
think
my
about...
degree.
But then
That's
I
your
think
degree.
like, would I have liked to do technical film kind of classes? And I again, Stereo Argento, please go check it out. But I'm making all these like promotional videos for it, and I have a lot of
super fun.
Yeah, like I really just like to kind of echo Argento style and things like this. But I kind of don't know what I'm doing. I kind of know exactly what I'm doing, but then it comes to a thing where it's like, cannot export, cannot import because of X dimensions, do not meet this. And it's like, I kind of wish I had those skills. But then again, I think this has just been my mantra lately. There's no right or wrong way to do it. And I think making a film super punk rock and super maybe not by the book is great. And I think that the fact this is her first feature, right? And she was an actress, and she is already working on a next film, which is going to be a period piece, it seems. And it gives me a lot of hope. And I have a question for you guys. If The Babadook was to be screened side by side another film as a double feature, what would you pair it with?
Well, I haven't seen it, but knowing enough about the plot, it's a boring answer, but Goodnight Mommy seems like a good... I still haven't seen it, but it strikes me as being an obvious pair. But maybe while Chad answers, I'll give a better answer.
It's my answer for everything. Fight Club, probably. I mean, just the whole... another reason why is David Fincher does a lot of what is so great about The Babadook is so much of Fight Club. Look, aside from the obvious, like, oh, is this in the person's imagination or whatever, the house in Fight Club is fucking phenomenal looking. And there's so much that goes on in the shadows of that house. And the decrepitude of the space, like you were talking earlier about like space being really important. Like the idea that there's just this big house in the middle of nowhere where this subversive, crazy shit happens. I love that, and I think it would be a nice pairing. And Fincher is like a master shadow. There's actually one of our listeners turned me onto this lessons from the screenplay video, which is comparing Seven and True Detective, and both of those are really interesting as far as like shadow and light go. And if you listen to the director's commentary on Seven, they talk about like the special type of film they use to get the darks to be so dark. Yep. And I don't know whether or not Babadook was shot on film. I don't think it looks like it is.
So I double feature. My selection is, I said it before, Home Alone. I go pair with Home Alone.
Very
great.
good.
Not only
Home Alone and The Babadook.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of like I'm kind of joking, but I'm not. Like,
no.
Also, Macaulay Culkin and Noah Wiseman, who plays Samuel, both carry a lot of weight. I mean, Macaulay Culkin's role in Home Alone is weightier because it's almost entirely him. And there are a lot of overlaps between the two films.
Yeah, it's one of the things that Jennifer Kent brings up a little bit is she had been a child actress, and she talks about all the extra work they did to not expose Noah to the darker elements of the film. So I'm curious how that worked. He never sees the Babadook. He's never present on set for any of the more horrifying stuff. So I'm wondering like how they got all that horrific looking
he was just
screaming.
Dabbed him with pikes.
Yeah.
Just stab his foot with something sharp.
Yeah. I mean,
I can't imagine how they got him there,
Yeah.
He was...
the scene where he has like the seizure is really like intense, and one of the things that's so curious about that scene is it takes place in broad daylight in a station wagon, and it's scary as shit. It's like one of the scenes that's really, really dark.
What's also really dark is, unfortunately, I don't know about you guys, but when I see a kid that committed to a role that young, I have a hard time not thinking that I hope to God this kid's parents don't fuck him up. I hope, the child actor thing, especially when they're extremely talented when they're young, never
real
ends
life
well.
Parents, yeah.
Real life parents. Like, childhood actors, it's often really hard. Really, really talented childhood actors, that's a recipe for disaster.
And in Australia, of all places, I mean, it's like where serial killers go to roam free.
Yeah. It's funny, like this movie is like really an Australian film, like when you think about it in the context of like John Hillcoat's The Proposition or any of the other really dark westerns that happen down there. And it's funny, I was thinking about this thing about Australia and genre people. Like for some people, Australia is Paul Hogan. For other people, Australia is Nick Cave. And
Nick Cave.
Yeah, to me, like
Dogs in Space.
Like this is, Nick Cave's Australia.
I think Wolf Creek.
Totally. Yeah.
God damn.
But Wolf Creek.
I don't like thinking about that movie.
Everybody hates on that movie.
It's so disturbing. I don't want to think about it. It's great.
It's just it's a film that just kills people out of order. Like you don't expect the order in which they die, and like I haven't seen that. Well, I mean, so at Stereo Argento, the film I'll be doing is Dressed to Kill, and De Palma kind of kills her off. Psycho, yeah, but sorry, I digress. Australian horror. Or just Australia.
Yeah, just Australia. I mean, you also have like most of the world's dangerous snakes are there. Like, you know, it is a very hostile. I mean, people just live around the ring of it because the middle of it's so fucking dangerous.
Yeah, I feel like when people come back from trips to Australia, at least my friends come back with photos of like, look at this beautiful waterfall. This spider was bigger than my head. You know, like beauty and terror.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It also like. Jennifer Kent was talking about, somebody had asked her about how, like It Follows, you sort of don't get an exact time of when this movie's taking place. Like, there's a cell phone, but then there's a landline that she cuts, and, you know, she's calling into work to get off, like in kind of an old method, you know. Her car is quite old, but somebody's talking about mergers, and in the television they're watching, the shows they're watching are very old.
Yeah. But she does have a cell phone.
She does have a cell phone, yeah. Like, and It Follows, there's the e-reader cell phone that's like weird and out of place. But she describes it, and I thought this was pretty cheeky of her, that Australia is just like 20 years behind.
Yeah.
Which I thought was pretty hilarious.
Canada's about 10.
Yeah. I thought Canada was supposed to be so forward.
No, just in their medicine.
No, Jesus.
Just in how they care for their people.
No, it's so wrong.
So where are we? What are we missing?
My double feature.
Yes.
I saw a lot of similarities between Amelia and Carrie's mom.
Yeah.
Just even the way that they look. Like, I don't know the actress that plays Carrie's mom in the original De Palma.
Piper Laurie. Amazing.
The actress is Piper Laurie, and the woman, God damn it now, who plays Amelia?
Essie Davis.
Who?
Essie Davis is the actress that plays her.
Essie, yeah.
Which is pretty funny. Like, we were talking about algorithms again, because I had typed in Essie Davis. Now I'm getting ads for a nail polish company called Essie popping up. It's like, she's so obscure of an actress that the nail polish company I've never heard of before is beating her.
Yeah.
Which is bullshit, because she's fucking rad. And another reason why you guys need to watch Game of Thrones. Because she's in that too.
I can't get rid of
the Babadook.
You can't get rid of Game of Thrones either, apparently.
Essie
Davis.
So the actress is Essie Davis, who plays Amelia.
Yeah.
And Piper Laurie, who plays Carrie's mom.
Yeah.
Look really similar.
Oh, God. Yeah.
Even like in their kind of crazed, like Mad Woman kind of shtick. But I don't know if that's a double feature that I would bill, but one of my favorite horror films that's come out in the last 5 years has been The Pact. 2012.
Yeah, I don't know it.
Oh my gosh, you guys have to do The Pact. It's kind of about this childhood home, and you know that it was hard growing up, and it's a little bit haunted.
The Pact is great. I was really into it.
Yeah, this idea of the boogeyman, this question of whether or not monsters are real. In The Pact, that motherfucker is straight up real. He is behind your wall. He lives there.
Yeah.
Like, there's a little weird room that he lives in, and he sneaks out and eats your pickles and like sits on your chest like a little incubus while you sleep.
I know. I've seen so little foreign horror compared to everything, the other stuff I've seen. I mean, pretty much any American 80s horror film I've probably seen, and I completely checked out in the early 2000s. So basically everything from 2000 to 2006 I haven't seen, and then almost no foreign horror.
Huh. See, I've seen almost anything from Europe between 68 and 80. Like, almost everything, but I'm pretty patchy with everything else.
I like 2000 to 2006. I think that was actually a really nice heyday. It kind of like started to get over the whole...
So what are we talking about there? Like, name some films. Just
I think I'm thinking of like New French Extremity.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's kind of when the Texas Chainsaw remake came out that I really liked. But it was, for me, when I was like finally old enough to go see movies by myself. it just seemed different from all the horror movies I'd seen on TV that were like 90s movies, because they were like urban legend and Scream and like there's a formula that we have to follow. But like early 2000s, there's just some like dirty ass shit that I think like is kind of maybe not the French stuff, but definitely is a response to 9/11.
Yep. And
then this whole kind of like franchise thing came along, like the Conjuring franchise or this franchise or that, and then it's just like that's where American horror loses me.
It's interesting how like horror always has had sequel based franchises. I mean, there's like 11 Friday the 13th, you know, 7 or 8 depending on how you count them, Nightmare on Elm Streets. But I think that like The Conjuring might be the first like multi-franchise different protagonist and antagonist
with the
film.
exception of the versus films like Alien versus Predator, Freddy versus.
Are those the same production company?
No. I just mean that. Wait, doesn't Freddy versus somebody?
Freddy does fight
Freddy versus Jason.
Yeah.
So,
which is
other than
really
that,
good.
which
But
doesn't
almost say
count. That's a crossover.
yeah.
That's not an extended universe.
That's almost more like Marvel Secret Wars. It's like a weird thing that happened, you know, and then pretty much everybody forgets. I don't know that you can count Alien versus Predator. It's just, it doesn't satisfy fans of Alien or Predator.
It's just shifted from like, let's not make sequels, let's make remakes. And then it's like,
right.
Okay.
You brought up the Chainsaw remake twice. Is it actually good? Because like I categorically reject it just on principle. But if you say I should see it, I'll totally see it.
I loved it.
Okay.
I thought that it was just like so formative for me. Like, I think another reason why Alone Not Alone is the movie it is, and why I'm interested in the things that I'm interested in horror, are kind of products of me being alone. You know, my parents worked and didn't come home until dinner time, and that would leave a good couple hours for me to be home alone after school.
Yeah.
I would run around my house, pretend like I would like have some like water in my hand and drip it on the floor behind me like it was blood, and the serial killer was gonna find me, like stabbing. Like, you can even ask Jennifer Locke. Like, I kind of reenacted this in one of her classes, but like there was something that was just so familiar, but just so like cool about Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the 2003 version.
Did you see the original before or after you had seen it?
After.
Mm-hmm. And what was your response to it? Did you like it better, or?
I thought it was a little boring.
Interesting.
Now I've completely flipped the script and
Yeah.
love the original, but at that age, you know, it's like, I was like, why is it funny? Like, what? Like, why is the brother in the wheelchair like funny? Like, this is a scary movie. Like,
the brother,
yeah. So I didn't necessarily understand it, but now, like, especially like hearing about all the shit that they had to go through to make that movie, like,
like
cooking
they
like
actually
we
cut
are,
the girl's finger and she freaks out at the dinner table. Do you know that story?
I didn't know they actually cut her finger.
Yeah. So the famous scene where they like cut her hand is she's just not cooperative as an actress. I mean, it was over 100 degrees in that house. They had been in it like for 4 days. The entire
It smelled like rotting meat because
there
was
meat
rotting
everywhere. Yeah, and so the actress was just not giving the performance, and the director takes the tape off the knife. There's like a safety tape on the knife, and he like tells the other actor, he's like, cut her fucking finger, and then we can basically all go home because we'll get the thing. And so they cut her hand, and she fucking loses her shit, and it's a great scene, which reminds me of our conversation about Black Swan. Like, does cruelty get a better performance? And I say yes.
Hit him with a stick.
Yeah.
But then back to Babadook, they totally like sheltered this kid from it.
That's
That's true.
Yeah,
That's
that's a
actually
really
true.
great point.
Yeah, but that's because he's a professional.
Yeah.
And he's
You know,
Australian.
he was
He's
just
not like that Shelley Duvall who needs to be mentally tortured to give a kid.
Yeah.
Love you, Shelley.
Yeah.
Even Shelley Duvall's performance is very similar to Amelia's in this film.
Yeah.
Just like, again, thinking about space and thinking about theory around the Mad Woman in the attic. Like, yeah, I mean, I think that's present here because it's what Mad Woman in the attic and Babadook in the basement.
Yeah.
We're talking about like, you know, post-Victorian era when rooms began to be regimented and assigned different tasks and genders and sexuality. You know, what is private, what's public space in the home, and thinking about the attic and the cellar in relation to this. It doesn't tackle the attic, but I think the fact that she like is an artist kind of goes there. Like you would imagine that she works from home, right? I like the polarity, just looking at a house vertically in that way and thinking about like the narrative of a film too, from like start to finish and all the things that happen in between.
Another thing Jennifer Kent said in an interview is that basements aren't really a thing in Australia. Like people do have basements, but like the decision to even have all this weird shit happening in the basement of an Australian home adds an odd dimension to it. It's like a feature that, especially like a suburban home like that, probably wouldn't have had a big, gigantic, dark basement. And, you know, being from Louisiana, I was always so jealous of any movie where kids had their own little basement room to play D&D in.
My entire childhood was basements.
Yeah.
Scary, dank, creepy as fuck basements.
And I think like circling all the way back to my frustration around how they tackled the basement in this film, maybe it's because they don't know what a basement is. But like basements are playpens. They are like spaces to just like get weird and like just let it all hang out. There's spider webs. There's like this sense of neglect, this sense of like the upside down world. Like I can do things that aren't necessarily what I would be doing up these stairs.
It's like the rules slightly shift when you go downstairs.
Yeah. And then
The rules that you're bred to intuit around domesticity are shifted. There's a little more autonomy in a basement. There's a little more independence and secrecy and
space for imagination and space to conceal that imagination. There's a door that you can close and be like, that is where I stash all my gay porn and I whack off to it when my wife isn't here.
It's similar to if you live away, like out where there is forest or trees or a river or something. It's similar. Like you are not in the domestic space. You're in your own space and where you can hide your contraband. And
yes.
Yeah, I mean, this is a suburban horror film.
Yeah.
And one of the things about suburban horror is it follows the model of fairy tales, which is on the edge of civilization. There is darkness. There is the fairy. There is some sort of shit going to fuck your whole life up. And there is no real like edge of the suburbs in this one, like in E.T. or even Stranger Things. There's the moment where it touches the forest. But there is the underground element. You know, they go into the basement, and then the last scene is it pans out of the grave of the dog into the black rosed garden. So there's something to that, you know, going underground or going under.
Yeah.
You know, it's the land of hell.
I want to circle back and talk about the Babadook as a queer icon just again.
Yeah.
That might be a perfect way to close.
Yeah, I don't even actually know what I want to say, but I think it would be a good way to close.
Yeah. You know, in some ways it's great that the Babadook gay icon thing happened because it gave us a way to be both very late on covering this film and also very timely on it.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. I think like what is it that you're reading? What is the name of it? Like questioning whether or not something is real, the monsters are real. You mentioned it earlier. It was something that you said.
No, we were referring to another podcast called
Deadly Analysis.
Oh,
yeah.
It's another podcast. It's only on YouTube. It's called Deadly Analysis, and their most recent episode was actually on the Babadook. Right?
Yeah, they put it.
So they were late to the game too. So I don't feel as bad.
He is very much in vogue.
Yeah, and one of the fun things about it was their episode, I think, was in production and recorded before like the Slate article came out.
Yeah.
So I had posted, that you were going to be on the show, and then they messaged me and said, "Oh, that's great. We just got our episode." It's like fucking awesome, great. Which is one of the things that's so fun about this is nobody's like stepping on each other's toes. It's not like, oh fuck, they did an episode in the Babadook. Fuck those guys. Like I legitimately want to hear what they have to say.
It might help us out.
But they, for whatever, I think it was just happened afterwards. They didn't really touch on it at all. And I wonder
on the queerification
of it. I wonder if our discussion of the actual film would have been much different if this wasn't a thing. Like if we had just decided to do the Babadook today and it had not been claimed as a gay icon, what sort of experience of the film we would have had?
I suspect it would have been very similar, except for the parts where we talked about.
I think everything we talked about the film was its own thing, and this meme viral thing that's going on is something different. But the door's closed, it's locked. In the other room beyond the door, there's a tiger. Is the tiger real? The tiger is real, maybe. It's kind of like existing in that liminal space, and I think the Babadook inhabits the same thing. Like, if he's on the other side of the door, is the Babadook real? I'm telling you, he's on the other side of the door. The Babadook is behind you. Is he real? The Babadook's in the same room as you. Is he real? He's under your skin. But something in me thinks that it's super appropriate that people culturally are just kind of carrying that mentality around a plethora of kind of social justice issues. Like, it's on the other side of the door. I don't need to address it right now. And I think, like, as queer people, we're kind of fighting back by saying, like, fuck yeah, our favorite TV show is now all in your face, and straight men are now Team Trinity or Team Sasha or Team Shay. And, like,
I don't know what that means.
They are the finalists on season 9 of Drag Race.
See, I'm super behind. I've only seen a few episodes.
I hope I didn't spoil it for you. But
Jesus.
But it's just kind of this mentality again that I think, like, yes, he's very flamboyant. Like, he does have a great manicure. He does wear makeup. He does, like, Baba kind of sounds like Gaga, and everyone loves, like, Lady Gaga, and, like,
You're stretching it now.
no, because Yes Gaga is like something like Yes Gaga boots the house down, bitch. And now it's Yes Baba. It's like the same rhetoric.
Right.
The whole Baba Shook thing is hilarious.
Pretty good.
It is, because I'm like, do I pronounce it Baba Shook or Baba Shook?
Shook. Right.
Oh, that's a good question.
I mean, it's
Are you Australian?
No, so
Could be a
shook
regional.
it is.
Could be a regional thing.
Yeah.
But, AC/DC, you shook me all night long. Shook.
Right,
so there we have the Australian pronunciation.
Were they Australian? AC/DC?
Oh,
Yeah. There is also, a little side note, isn't there a bit of, like, Angus look to that kid sometimes when he's wearing the tie and stuff like that? He definitely has that sort of, like...
the wiry curly hair. And or messed up curly hair.
Yeah. Sorry.
I drew a picture of a vagina with cockroaches crawling out of it.
Oh,
Why would you do that?
Because of the tear in the wall, the very yonic kind of slit in the... I didn't mean a hole in the wall, I meant a hole in the wallpaper.
Right.
I love how she, like, tears up the wallpaper and throws it away in exactly the same way that she tears up and throws away the book. It's like the same shot. I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Where would be a good place to end on the Babadook as a gay icon? I mean, are we making a statement of affirmation or...
Yeah, I think, to maybe wrap things up, I think that enough time has passed since the initial kind of wave of what confusion, like, the Babadook, queer icon, how, why? And maybe there was just one article about it that you would read, but then everyone else would, like, still, like, be freaking out, and you'd be like, what? Am I not cool enough? I don't understand what's going on.
Yeah.
But then I feel like enough time has passed for us to look at it more as I really kind of think the Babadook being gay is a conversation about technology and our digital lives, and just how we have a hive mind. We're essentially working bees that kind of, like, latch onto something, and we kind of just all work together to build it up into this thing until it blows over. Because I read that as soon as you give a meme content, you kill the meme, because it's no longer necessarily as readily shareable, because now it comes with all this weight. So this is going to pass. And just, like, moving forward, just, like, being really excited about, like, oh, cool. Like, whatever this really weird, trendy, viral octopus is that's floating above us, and it's, like, reaching its things down and grabbing the next in thing. It touched a weird horror movie that, like, had a small budget and was foreign, and people are Babadooking the house down, and it's so interesting.
Yeah, I imagine we'll see at least some Babadook related thing this weekend at Pride. I mean, there's got to be something.
The cosplay will be present, no doubt.
Yeah. Also, cosplay, drag for nerds. I just started thinking about that.
All right, let's fade to black and roll the credits. Thank you for being on, Meredith, a.k.a.
Absolutely.
Andrew Sheets. We want to see everybody at Stereo Argento this June 30th at the Stud, Harrison and 9th.
Yeah, so it is from 10 to 3, $5 before 11, $10 afterwards. There's going to be a teledisco to dance to, dark wave to dance to, film projections, and of course our fabulous drag show.
Including Phonique, Monique Jenkinson,
Roxanne Redmeat, Johnny Rocket, myself, and Jillian Narling.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah, and if you guys, want to say hi, I mean, we're definitely not the folks at Stereo Argento. Come see the awesome performers, but Mark is the gentleman that looks like a ravishing Jason Statham, and I look like a Duck Dynasty extra.
Also true.
Yeah, so...
All right. Subscribe. Give us some ratings on iTunes and Stitcher. Join our mailing list.
Join our mating list as well, please.
No, you know what? Do not. If this movie taught me anything, it's that the choice to not have kids was a correct one. See you next time for whatever movie we decide to cover. Or movie, book, meme, whatever. I don't know. It's all falling apart. Love you. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for having me.